When a pearl shatters, its physical structure undergoes absolute failure. Entropy takes over. The damage is permanent and irreversible. This concept of irreversible rupture is the architectural foundation of a 12th century poem, Avachana, composed by the radical ascetic Akka Mahadevi. The original text survives in dense, carved Kalachuri-era script, carrying the immense historical weight of the ancient Kannada language. Reading this text in English often relies on formal equivalence, a word-for-word literal translation. It states, "If the pearl breaks, can it be welded? If the mine shatters, can it be brought to peace? And the elements are spoiled, does anything remain?" Read strictly at this surface level, the poem presents a mundane narrative. It sounds like a conventional lament about a broken romantic relationship, ending in physical death. This literal reading creates an epistemological illusion. It masks the radical transpersonal mysticism that Mahadevi engineered into the original Kannada text. Directly, to understand this text, we must abandon Western linguistic assumptions. We must deconstruct the poem's Dravidian lexical roots. The 12th century Sharana movement utilized organic spirituality. Organic spirituality is a framework where language roots spiritual ascension directly in physical, biological, and agricultural processes. Contrast this with Western languages, which are structurally biased to separate the spiritual from the physical. They lack the inherent vocabulary to describe nature as the direct mechanism of spiritual realization. Translating this text is an act of reconciling two entirely incompatible systems of understanding human existence. Let's examine two specific Kannada words, mutu, translated as pearl, and besaya, translated as welding. In context, mutu isn't jewelry. It represents the pure soul or rigid human ego. Besaya is a harsh blacksmith's term, an unnatural, artificial soldering of an organic object. Akka Mahadevi mocks the attempt to force a liberated ego back into oppressive societal structures. Specifically, her abandoned forced marriage to King Kaushika. The broken pearl is a precise articulation of psychological entropy. Once the ego is shattered, returning to worldly compliance is a physical impossibility. This leads to the poem's climax, the phrase dhatu geta, literally elements spoiled. A Western reading misinterprets this as biological death. This reflects Cartesian dualism, a framework that rigidly divides the immaterial mind from the mechanical physical body. The Sharana lexicon breaks this model. Kaya, the word for body, derives from unripe fruit, a vessel ripening through spiritual practice until the spirit is ready. Dhatu geta refers to the complete cessation of somatic identity and physical attachment, while the subject is still alive and breathing. The Vachana describes a spiritual maturation. The physical elements have ripened to the point of dissolution, rendering worldly identity obsolete while the body remains. We draw parallels to the Sufi concept of fana, the annihilation of the self, or the Christian dark night of the soul. Mahadevi's mysticism diverges through its aggression. It is a targeted rejection of patriarchal authority and the king's possessive gaze. Her destination is not a metaphorical heaven. It is lingana samarasya, total union with the Lord of the Mountains. By weaponizing her own physical vulnerability, Mahadevi transforms ascetic withdrawal into an act of feminist and spiritual defiance. Literal English fails to capture this defiance. One solution is Kwame Anthony Appiah's concept of thick translation. Thick translation is a method that embeds heavy cultural and historical context directly into the text's margins to bridge the gap between two worldviews. This populates the screen with brackets, footnotes, and sprawling marginalia. It defines terms like sadhaka and maya in academic detail to rescue the philosophy. The drawback is that while thick translation clarifies the philosophy, it suffocates the poetry. It turns a battle cry into an academic textbook. We must find a method that preserves Mahadevi's meaning without destroying her poem's velocity. This leads to the final framework, Lawrence Venuti's foreignizing translation. Foreignizing translation is a strategy that deliberately retains original cultural terms to disrupt the reader's domestic expectations. Foreignization refuses to domesticate the text. It leaves culturally pregnant terms like mutu, machu, and datu untranslated. Grappling with these words on the text's own terms preserves its radical otherness. It forces the reader to acknowledge a system beyond their own. Through this lens, the poem reveals its final intent. It is an engineered argument for the absolute void, or Bayalu. Akka Mahadevi's Vachana forces a confrontation with the absolute. Our rigid, modern frameworks of language and self must be shattered as irreversibly as the pearl.